Hello epic YouTubers, Mike here, and today I'm going to be talking about super quick 5 tips on using your Sony ZV-1. I've been recently uploading a lot of Sony ZV-1 related content, and it seems like a lot of people are interested, so I just kind of gathered, I don't want to like to say tips, but my way of using the Sony ZV-1. So let's jump right in. First of all is mic volume. I kind of always thought, what's the best mic volume? And a lot of tutorials tell you that, oh, set it in between 20 to 25. But that doesn't really make sense because everybody has different loudness and tones and stuff like that. So what I do is I try to speak to the mic while I'm adjusting the volume, and I want that gauge to sit between -6 and -12. So I'll be just talking like this, try to test. I want that gauge to be in between -6 and -12. And in post, I'll try to adjust it so it will be as close to as -6. I don't know if that's the correct way to do it, but that's how I'm doing it, and this is what you guys are actually hearing. Second, using aperture priority or shutter priority instead of full auto. A lot of people will be, saying the best mode is manual. Of course it is, because you'll be getting your desired look. But I think Sony ZV-1 is used by a lot of vloggers for run and gun, quick shoot, and that kind of stuff. So I think the most important thing is efficiency. And I don't think manual is the best way to do it. Obviously, if you're experienced, then you'll be fine, but I'm probably trying to help out those who are just, shooting with Sony ZV-1 or have less experience than those others who are experienced. So what are the two differences? Aperture priority is when you set your own aperture and the camera will decide what shutter speed and ISO is going to be. And shutter priority is when you set your shutter and the camera will be deciding your aperture and ISO. So what this does is, on aperture priority, you can actually adjust your depth of field if you want to have a blurry background and stuff like that. But downside of aperture priority is when you're shooting on a sunny day, your shutter is gonna be super fast to cut down that light, so your motion is gonna be super choppy. It was gonna look way too smooth, losing that natural motion blur. And for shutter priority, you'll have a natural motion blur, but you won't be able to control the depth of field. So everything might get into focus and it might not look as cinematic. So it's just a personal preference on what you guys want to achieve, what look that you guys want. In my personal preference is shutter priority. I want to have a natural motion blur instead of very choppy video. I don't think the depth of field is that important when I'm trying to run and gun, try to show everything in a proper way. I think it's more pleasing in your eyes when you have natural motion blur. So one note, if you're using shutter priority, you won't be able to use the defocus button. The reason is you are setting your shutter, and if you use the defocus button, that basically means that you're gonna make the aperture go wide open, so like 1.8, and you only have your camera will only have ISO to control or cut down light, and ISO can go so low. So that means that if you click on the defocus button, that your image is gonna be super bright and won't be able to see. So just to make sure that you know that in shutter priority, you won't be able to use defocus button. So the third tip is setting your custom buttons. For C1, I put it as toggle autofocus, and C2, I put it as ND filters. And I think ND filter is one of the most used feature in this camera because I shoot the Sony ZV-1 in a lot of bright daylight situation, and using ND filter will help you cut down the light by I think 2-3 stops, which helps with a certain situation. Because for instance, if I'm using, let's say, aperture priority, where I set the most shallow depth of field, let's say 1.8, but because I had it fully open, the shutter speed goes up by like 1/500. By using ND filter, I will cut down the light so the shutter speed won't be as high and it will be more closer to natural motion blur. And for instance, when I'm using shutter priority, I set it as 50, but because of the light, it will show like f11 or f10. But by using ND filter, it will cut down to like, let's say, f5.6. It will be less, you will have a little bit more control over your depth of field versus having everything in focus if you don't use your ND filters. Hopefully that made sense. And here's the tip number 4, using manual focus on your Sony ZV-1. Yes, it doesn't really have a good barrel or way to adjust manual focus. So what I do is I set the toggle AF as C1, have certain thing that I want to be in focus, and I can just change it to manual focus and then start recording. This is useful when you are shooting at a place where there's a lot of moving people or moving objects. So this way you don't lose track or lose focus of your subject. Also, manual focus is pretty useful when you're trying to get something very small in focus, like set your focus at a certain point, change it to manual, and you can have the same distance and have that object in focus. And also you can use the manual focus at night because this camera has hard time focusing when there's less light or dark. So you want to use your manual focus, and at least you know that in certain distance certain things will be in focus. So that's how I use my manual focus with the Sony ZV-1. Number 5 is about using your zebras to expose your skin correctly. So shooting this kind of video or shooting people outside, what I do is actually set the zebra not to like 100 or something, but to 70. So I keep adjusting my exposure until your skin does not have zebra or have very little zebra pattern showing. That way I know it's kind of correctly exposed, I say. So what I do is I set the zebra button somewhere or in one of your function menus. And so I just quickly turn it on to see if there's any zebras on the skin. If there is, lower the light, and then when it goes off, I just turn it off and I start recording it. So last bonus tip is using your memory recall feature. I made a video recently, and if you guys want to watch it, I'll link it somewhere here. But having those memory recall is very convenient because you can have one memory to set as regular 24p or 25p, put your memory 2 or recall 2 to, let's say, slow motion or stuff like that. So where you can actually quickly switch between certain video modes to be a little bit more efficient. Okay, so that's it for me today. Hopefully my video was helpful. Please give me a like if it did. And if you guys are interested to see something similar content like this in the future, please subscribe. And also, if you guys want to ask any question related to anything, please comment down below. I'll try to reply as much as I can. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.